He walked among them like any other man, a neighbor, a friend, a father. But within the walls of his home, there were no warm embraces, no laughter, no peace. There was only blood. For years, people vanished without a trace. Their names faded, their families left with questions no one could answer. Until one day, the truth surfaced, and what lay beneath was far worse than anyone could have imagined. A man, driven by something he would never fully explain, a force he claimed demanded sacrifice, a hunger that could never be satisfied. Tonight, we uncover the case of a man who didn't just kill, he offered lives for reasons that defied all logic. A story so disturbing it leaves behind one haunting question. What if he was never meant to be caught? The case you are about to hear is real, the victims, real, the horrors, unimaginable. This isn't a story of an ordinary murderer. This is something far more disturbing. A man who believed his crimes were not crimes at all, but rituals, necessary, sacred. Over the years, bodies were found, some missing vital organs, others arranged in ways that defied explanation. Law enforcement struggled to connect the dots, but one thing was clear. Whoever was behind this had a purpose, a method, and he was far from done. How did he evade justice for so long? And what finally led to his downfall? Tonight, we uncover the terrifying truth about a man whose rituals blurred the line between myth and nightmare. But be warned, once you hear this story, you will never forget it. To understand the horrors that unfolded, we must go back to where it all began, before the police reports, before the bodies, before the whispers of a man who did the unthinkable. His name was Victor Halloway. To those who knew him, he was unremarkable, a man who kept to himself, spoke little, and never drew attention. But behind closed doors, his life was anything but ordinary. He grew up in a place where fear was woven into everyday life, a town haunted by stories, stories of those who vanished without a trace, stories of rituals performed in the dead of night, stories no one dared to question. As a child, he listened. As a man, he followed. The first disappearance barely made the news. A drifter, no family, no search parties, just another name lost to time. But it didn't stop there. One missing person became 2, then 3, then more. And with each disappearance, the same unspoken truth lingered in the air. Something was terribly wrong. But no one saw him. No one suspected. He moved unnoticed, choosing his victims carefully, making sure there were no patterns, no loose ends. And as he did, his rituals grew more elaborate, more brutal, until finally the bodies were no longer hidden. They were left as warnings. But what was he trying to achieve, and why did he believe his rituals had meaning? The answer is even more disturbing than the crimes themselves. It started with a single body, a discovery so gruesome that even seasoned investigators struggled to process what they were looking at. A young man, reported missing days earlier, found deep in the woods. His body was positioned carefully, arms spread, symbols carved into his skin, his blood drained, his heart missing. The scene was methodical, precise. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints, no fingerprints. Whoever did this had planned every detail, and this was no ordinary killing. The autopsy confirmed the worst. The wounds weren't random. They followed a pattern, a ritual. But why? And for what purpose? Local authorities were quick to dismiss it as a one-time act of violence, a case with no immediate suspects, no clear motive. But they were wrong. This was just the beginning. Days later, another body appeared, then another. Different locations, different victims, but the same horrifying precision, the same symbols, the same missing organs. A signature was emerging, a pattern the police couldn't ignore. Someone was out there, taking lives with purpose. But how did he choose his victims? And why was he leaving the bodies behind now? The answer was far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. The murders weren't random. Each victim was chosen carefully, their deaths serving a purpose only one man understood. But it wasn't until the final body was found that the true horror of his rituals was exposed. A woman, missing for weeks, discovered inside an abandoned house at the edge of town. Unlike the others, she wasn't left in the open. She was placed in the center of a crude symbol drawn in blood, her eyes covered, her hands bound, and at her feet, a bowl filled with something investigators refused to describe. This wasn't just a killing. This was something else entirely, a message, a warning, a ritual completed. For the first time, law enforcement had a location, a place where the killer had stood, where he had worked, where he had taken his time. The walls told a story, markings etched deep into the surface, candles burned down to nothing, strange objects arranged in ways that defied explanation. And in the center of it all, something worse than anyone could have imagined. Jars, lined up in perfect rows, each labeled, each filled with something that should have never been taken from the victims. Organs, preserved, stored like trophies, proof that the killings were more than just violence. They were steps towards something greater, something only he understood. And then, the final discovery. A book, handwritten, pages filled with instructions, notes, descriptions of what was done and what was still to come. The case had reached its peak. They were closer than ever. But the killer, he wasn't finished yet. The pieces were finally coming together. The symbols, the patterns, the locations, it all led back to one man. But finding him was another story. He had no known address, no steady job, no traceable routine. He moved in silence, leaving nothing behind except the bodies. Until one night, everything changed. A woman, barely alive, stumbled into a gas station miles from town. She was weak, covered in dirt, her wrists bruised from rope burns. She could barely speak, but she didn't have to. The look in her eyes said everything. She had escaped. Authorities swarmed the area she described, a remote farmhouse hidden behind miles of overgrown trees, a place no one had thought to look. But when they got there, the nightmare was far from over. Inside, the air was thick with decay, the walls covered in symbols matching those found at the crime scenes, and in the basement, the truth that had eluded them for years. A room, small, windowless, the smell of old blood clinging to the air, chains bolted into the floor, and at the center, an altar, stained, used, still warm. But the most disturbing discovery was a journal left open, as if someone had just been reading it. One sentence, scrawled over and over, filling an entire page. One more, just one more. But there would be no more. Because after years of evading justice, the man responsible for it all was finally caught. His name became a stain on history, his crimes too horrific to fully comprehend. But the true question remained: why? What drove him to believe that death could serve a higher purpose? And did he truly believe? It worked. With his arrest, the case seemed closed. The town could finally breathe. The killings had stopped. The fear had lifted. But for those who looked deeper, the story was far from over. During interrogation, he spoke in riddles. He admitted nothing, yet denied nothing. When asked why he did it, his response was chilling. You wouldn't understand. Psychologists studied him. Some called him delusional. Others believed he was fully aware of his actions, calculating in every move. But there was one question no one could answer. Was he working alone? Because in the weeks after his capture, strange things began to happen. Reports of missing people, ones that fit his pattern, surfaced miles away, in places he had never been. The symbols, the methods, the rituals. they continued. If he was the mastermind, then who was still out there? To this day, there are those who believe he was part of something much larger, that his crimes were not his alone, that he was a follower, not a leader, and that somewhere in the shadows, others like him still exist. Was justice truly served, or was this only the beginning of something far worse? The case is closed, but the questions remain. Was he truly acting alone, or was he just one piece of a much larger puzzle? Let us know what you think in the comments. Was justice served, or is something far more terrifying still out there? If you found this story chilling, don't forget to like this video. It helps more people discover these unsettling cases. And if you're new here, subscribe for more real-life horror stories that will keep you awake at night. Check out our other true crime investigations here, and remember, some mysteries are never truly solved.